Title: The Web of Deceit. Chapter 1. The arrival. Agnes and Jason had been married for 10 years, their union a beacon of stability and commitment. They lived in a charming house in a serene suburb with a garden that Agnes tended to with loving care. Their life was comfortable, if not a little predictable, with routines that had become second nature to them. It was a warm spring day when Agnes's younger sister June arrived at their doorstep. June, with her fiery red hair and sharp green eyes, was a stark contrast to Agnes's gentle demeanor. She had always been the wild one, the one who took risks and lived on the edge. Her arrival was unexpected, and she carried with her an air of urgency and trouble. "Agnes, I need a place to stay," June said, her voice tinged with desperation. "I've moved to the city for a new job, and I need some time to get settled." Agnes, ever the nurturing sister, welcomed June with open arms. "Of course, June. Stay as long as you need." Jason, a tall man with a quiet strength about him, greeted June with a polite smile. "Welcome, June. Make yourself at home." As the days turned into weeks, June began to settle into their home. She found a job in the city and started to adapt to her new surroundings. However, her presence began to stir an undercurrent of tension in the household. June was volatile, her temper flaring at the slightest provocation, and her behavior unpredictable. Despite this, Jason tried his best to accommodate her. He spent more time at home, offering to help June with various tasks, hoping to ease her transition. It was during these moments that June began to notice Jason's kindness and patience. She found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. Her feelings for him grew stronger with each passing day. She admired his dedication to his wife, his unwavering sense of responsibility, and his quiet charm. It was everything she had never found in the men she had known. Slowly, she began to devise ways to get closer to him, to test the boundaries of his fidelity. At first, it was innocent enough. She would linger in the kitchen when he was cooking, striking up conversations about mundane topics. She would compliment him on his appearance, his cooking, anything to draw his attention. Jason, though aware of June's flirtatious behavior, dismissed it as harmless. One evening, when Agnes had gone to visit relatives, June saw her opportunity. She suggested that she and Jason have a few drinks to unwind. They sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting a warm light on their faces. As the alcohol loosened their tongues, June began to speak more freely. "Jason, do you ever feel like life is passing you by?" she asked, her voice hushed. Jason looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," June continued, her eyes locking onto his, "do you ever wonder if there's more to life than just this? The routine, the predictability?" Jason sighed, his gaze drifting to the floor. "Sometimes, I suppose, but I've made my choices and I'm content with them." June moved closer to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Content isn't the same as happy, Jason. Don't you deserve to be happy?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jason felt a pang of guilt, knowing that what she was suggesting was wrong. Yet he couldn't deny that a part of him was intrigued by her boldness, her willingness to challenge the status quo. Chapter 2. The Seduction. June's feelings for Jason grew stronger with each passing day. She admired his dedication to his wife, his unwavering sense of responsibility, and his quiet charm. It was everything she had never found in the men she had known. Slowly, she began to devise ways to get closer to him, to test the boundaries of his fidelity. At first, it was innocent enough. She would linger in the kitchen when he was cooking, striking up conversations about mundane topics. She would compliment him on his appearance, his cooking, anything to draw his attention. Jason, though aware of June's flirtatious behavior, dismissed it as harmless. "That smells amazing, Jason," June would say, leaning against the kitchen counter, her eyes following his every move. "You really have a talent for cooking." Jason would smile politely, stirring a pot of sauce or chopping vegetables. "Thanks, June. Just something I enjoy doing." June's comments became more frequent, her tone more suggestive. "You know, Agnes is really lucky to have a husband like you. You're quite the catch." Jason would chuckle, brushing off her remarks. "I just do what I can to help out." June started to take every opportunity to be near him. She would find excuses to join him in the garden, admiring his work and asking for gardening tips. She'd sit close to him during family movie nights, casually brushing her hand against his or resting her head on his shoulder. One evening, when Agnes had gone to visit relatives, June saw her opportunity. She suggested that she and Jason have a few drinks to unwind. "It's been a long week," she said, bringing out a bottle of wine. "Let's relax a bit." Jason hesitated, but then agreed, thinking it would be a harmless way to pass the time. They sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps casting a warm light on their faces. The room was cozy, filled with the comfortable silence that often comes from familiarity. As they sipped their wine, the alcohol began to loosen their tongues. They talked about their childhood, their dreams, and the paths their lives had taken. June's laughter was infectious, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of mischief and genuine affection. "Jason, do you ever feel like life is passing you by?" she asked, her voice hushed, a serious undertone creeping into her usually playful demeanor. Jason looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," June continued, her eyes locking on to his, "do you ever wonder if there's more to life than just this? The routine, the predictability?" Jason sighed, his gaze drifting to the floor. "Sometimes, I suppose, but I've made my choices, and I'm content with them." June moved closer to him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Content isn't the same as happy, Jason. Don't you deserve to be happy?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Jason felt a pang of guilt, knowing that what she was suggesting was wrong. Yet he couldn't deny that a part of him was intrigued by her boldness, her willingness to challenge the status quo. "June, I don't think we should be having this conversation," he said, his voice strained. "Why not?" June asked, her tone soft and persuasive. "We're just talking. There's no harm in that, right?" Jason looked into her eyes, seeing the intensity of her feelings. He knew he should push her away, should end this conversation before it went any further. But in that moment, his resolve wavered. The allure of June's attention, the validation she offered, was a tempting escape from the monotony of his daily life. June leaned in closer, her lips dangerously near his ear. "Jason, life is too short to settle for contentment. You deserve to be happy, truly happy." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the warmth of her breath against his skin, the soft touch of her hand on his arm. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop, to pull away, to remember the vows he had made to Agnes. But the intoxicating mix of wine, June's proximity, and his own suppressed desires clouded his judgment. "June, this isn't right," he whispered, his voice barely audible. June's hand moved to his cheek, gently turning his face towards hers. "Jason, sometimes doing what's right means listening to your heart. And right now, my heart is telling me that you need this as much as I do." Her words were a siren's call, pulling him towards the edge of a precipice. He knew that one more step would mean a fall from which there might be no return. But in that moment, the need for connection, for feeling something beyond the ordinary, overpowered his sense of duty and loyalty. Without another word, June closed the remaining distance between them, her lips meeting his, in a kiss that was both tender and urgent. Jason's mind screamed in protest, but his body responded, betraying him in the heat of the moment. For a few brief seconds, he allowed himself to get lost in the kiss, the sensation of June's lips against his. But as quickly as the moment began, reality crashed down on him. He pulled away, his breathing ragged, guilt and panic flooding his senses. "June, I can't do this," he said, his voice shaky. "This isn't fair to Agnes. We can't go down this path." June's eyes were filled with a mix of disappointment and longing. She nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I know, Jason. I'm sorry, I just couldn't help myself." Jason stood up, needing to put distance between them. "We need to stop this before it goes any further, for both our sakes." June watched him, her heart aching with unfulfilled desire. She knew that what she had done was wrong, but the feelings she had for Jason were real and overwhelming. She had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. As Jason left the room, June sat alone in the dim light, her mind racing with the implications of their actions. She had set a dangerous game in motion, one that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. The night ended with an uneasy truce, but the seeds of temptation had been sown. Jason's resolve had been tested, and though he had managed to resist, the memory of that kiss lingered, a constant reminder of the thin line between loyalty and desire. June, undeterred by the setback, vowed to bide her time. She believed that deep down, Jason felt the same way she did. All she needed was another opportunity to break through his defenses, to show him that happiness could be within their grasp, even if it came at a steep price. Chapter 3. The Fall. That night, as the alcohol clouded their judgment, June made her move. She leaned in, her lips brushing against Jason's ear as she whispered, "Let me make you happy, Jason." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he should push her away, should stop this before it went any further. But in that moment, his resolve crumbled. The combination of the wine, June's proximity, and his own suppressed desires overwhelmed him. He kissed her, a kiss that was filled with both desire and desperation. The kiss deepened, growing more passionate as Jason's hands tangled in June's fiery hair. She responded eagerly, her hands exploring his body with an urgency that matched his own. The world outside their small cocoon faded away, leaving only the two of them in the haze of their shared longing. They stumbled towards the bedroom, their movements frantic and uncoordinated. Clothes were discarded carelessly, leaving a trail from the living room to the bedroom. When they finally reached the bed, they collapsed onto it, their bodies entwined in a fevered embrace. June's hands roamed over Jason's body, her touch both gentle and insistent. She whispered words of encouragement, her breath hot against his skin. Jason's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: guilt, desire, fear, and a deep, aching need for connection. He tried to push the thoughts of Agnes from his mind, but they lingered like a ghost at the edge of his consciousness. As they made love, Jason found himself both lost in the moment and acutely aware of the wrongness of their actions. Each touch, each kiss, was a betrayal of the woman he had vowed to love and cherish. But in that fleeting instant, he allowed himself to be swept away by the intensity of the moment, by the allure of something forbidden. When it was over, they lay side by side, their breathing heavy and their bodies slick with sweat. Jason stared at the ceiling, the enormity of what he had done beginning to sink in. June, sensing his turmoil, turned to him and pressed a gentle kiss to his shoulder. "Don't think about it, Jason," she murmured. "Just be here with me now." But Jason couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of guilt that threatened to consume him. He knew that when Agnes returned, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. The thought filled him with a profound sense of dread. The next morning, Jason woke with a heavy heart. June was still asleep beside him, her fiery hair spread out on the pillow like a halo. He slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake her, and made his way to the bathroom. As he stared at his reflection in the mirror, he barely recognized the man looking back at him. The sound of the front door opening jolted him from his thoughts. Agnes was back, her cheerful voice calling out a greeting. Panic surged through him as he hurried to dress, his mind racing with the need to hide the evidence of his betrayal. "Jason, I'm home," Agnes called, her footsteps approaching the bedroom. Jason stepped out of the bathroom, forcing a smile. "Hey, honey, how was your trip?" Agnes beamed at him, oblivious to the tension in the room. "It was great. I brought back some of Aunt May's famous apple pie. You have to try it." June stirred in the bed, her presence a stark reminder of what had transpired the night before. Jason's heart raced as he tried to think of an excuse, something to explain why she was there. "June wasn't feeling well last night," Jason said, the lie slipping easily from his lips. "She stayed in our room to rest." Agnes's brow furrowed with concern. "Oh no, June. Are you all right?" June sat up, wrapping the sheet around her. "I'm fine, really. Just a bit of a headache." Agnes nodded, accepting the explanation without suspicion. "Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. Let's all have breakfast together." As they gathered in the kitchen, Jason struggled to keep up the facade of normalcy. Each smile, each word, felt like a betrayal. The secret they shared was a poison that slowly began to corrode his conscience. June, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by the situation. She chatted with Agnes as if nothing had happened, her demeanor calm and composed. Jason marveled at her ability to compartmentalize, to act as if their affair was just another part of her life. Over the next few weeks, Jason tried to distance himself from June, but the damage had been done. The memory of their night together lingered in his mind, a constant reminder of his weakness. He found himself avoiding Agnes, unable to look her in the eye. The guilt gnawed at him, eating away at his sense of self. June continued to seduce Jason, using every opportunity to remind him of their illicit connection. She would brush against him in the hallway, her touch lingering just a bit too long. She would catch his eye across the room, her gaze filled with a promise of more to come. "Jason," she would whisper when they were alone, "remember how good it felt? We could have that again." Jason's guilt grew with each encounter, but he couldn't find the strength to confess to Agnes. He was trapped in a web of deceit, woven by his own actions. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on him, a constant reminder of the man he had become. He tried to focus on his marriage, to make amends in small ways. He would bring Agnes flowers, cook her favorite meals, and try to be more attentive. But no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was living a lie. Agnes, blissfully unaware of the affair, continued to trust him implicitly. Her love for him was unwavering, her faith in their marriage unshaken. Each act of kindness from her only deepened Jason's guilt, making it harder for him to carry the burden of his secret. As the months passed, Jason became more and more withdrawn. The once happy and confident man was now a shadow of his former self. He lost weight, his sleep was plagued by nightmares, and the spark in his eyes dimmed. He knew he couldn't continue living like this, but he was terrified of the consequences of his confession. June, sensing his internal struggle, began to pressure him. "Jason, you can't keep this bottled up forever. Sooner or later, you're going to have to tell her." "I know," Jason would reply, his voice hollow, "but I can't. I can't break her heart like that." "You're already breaking it by lying to her," June would counter. "She deserves to know the truth." Jason knew she was right, but the fear of losing Agnes, of destroying the life they had built together, paralyzed him. He was trapped in a prison of his own making, with no clear path to redemption. As the anniversary of their betrayal approached, Jason reached a breaking point. He couldn't continue living with the guilt, the lies, the constant fear of being found out. He knew he had to confess, to face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful they might be. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Jason took a deep breath and turned to Agnes. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice trembling. Agnes looked at him, concern etched on her face. "What is it, Jason? You can tell me anything." Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared to reveal the truth. The words were heavy on his tongue, but he knew he had to say them. "Agnes, I've been unfaithful. June and we had an affair." The room fell silent, the weight of his confession hanging in the air. Agnes's face paled, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The pain in her expression was like a knife to Jason's heart, cutting deeper than he ever thought possible. "How could you?" Agnes whispered, her voice barely audible. "How could you do this to us?" Jason reached for her, but she pulled away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Agnes. I never meant for it to happen. I love you, and I want to make things right." But Agnes couldn't hear him. The betrayal was too great, the pain too overwhelming. She stood up, her body trembling, and walked out of the room, leaving Jason alone with his guilt and regret. As he sat there, the reality of his actions crashing down on him, Jason knew that he had lost something precious, something that could never be fully repaired. The road to redemption would be long and difficult, and he could only hope that one day Agnes would find it in her heart to forgive him. But for now, he was left to grapple with the consequences of his choices, the weight of his betrayal, a constant reminder of the man he had become. Chapter 4. The Confession. As the months passed, the weight of the secret became unbearable for Jason. He saw the toll it was taking on his marriage, on his own sense of self. Every day felt like a struggle, and every moment with Agnes was tainted by the guilt gnawing at his conscience. He knew he had to come clean, no matter the consequences. One evening, after a particularly restless night, filled with nightmares and self-recrimination, Jason decided it was time to tell Agnes the truth. He found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book, a peaceful scene that made his heart ache even more. "Agnes, we need to talk," he said, his voice trembling, betraying the storm of emotions raging inside him. Agnes looked up from her book, concern etched on her face. "What is it, Jason? You look so serious." Jason took a deep breath, his heart pounding so loudly he feared she might hear it. "There's something I need to confess, something I've been hiding from you for a long time." Agnes put her book down, her expression shifting from concern to worry. "What are you talking about?" Jason struggled to find the right words, the weight of his guilt almost choking him. "I've done something terrible, Agnes. something that I can never take back." As he began to speak, he saw the color drain from Agnes's face. He told her everything, about June's seduction, about the nights they had spent together, and about the guilt that had been eating away at him. He spared no detail, knowing that half-truths would only make things worse. The words tumbled out in a rush, each one a dagger to his heart. When he finished, Agnes was silent. She stared at him, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief, hurt, and fury. The room was so quiet that Jason could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, each second stretching into an eternity. "How could you do this to me, Jason? How could you betray me with my own sister?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the pain in it was unmistakable. Jason reached out to her, desperate to offer some comfort, some reassurance, but she recoiled, as if his touch would burn her. Tears streamed down her face, each one a testament to the depth of her suffering. "I'm so sorry, Agnes. I never meant for this to happen. Please forgive me." Agnes stood up, her hands trembling, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "I need some time to think, Jason. I can't deal with this right now. I need to be alone." She left the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence, leaving Jason alone with his remorse. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands, the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. He knew that their marriage would never be the same, that the trust they had built over 10 years had been shattered. Jason spent the night on the couch, unable to sleep. The house felt empty, the silence oppressive. He replayed the confession in his mind over and over, each time feeling the sting of Agnes's reaction. He knew he had hurt her deeply, perhaps irreparably, and the thought was almost too much to bear. The next morning, Agnes was gone. She had left a note on the kitchen table saying she needed some time away to think, to process everything. Jason's heart sank as he read the note, the finality of her words hitting him like a punch to the gut. He knew he had to give her the space she needed, but the thought of being without her was unbearable. Days turned into weeks, and Agnes remained distant. She called occasionally to check on the house, but the conversations were brief and devoid of the warmth that had once defined their relationship. Jason tried to keep himself busy, throwing himself into work and household projects, but nothing could distract him from the emptiness inside. June, sensing the tension, had moved out shortly after the confession. She left without much fanfare, a quiet departure that left a gaping hole in the household. Jason felt a strange mix of relief and sadness at her absence, knowing that her presence had been a constant reminder of his betrayal, but also missing the complicated bond they had shared. One evening, as Jason sat alone in the living room, the house eerily silent, the door opened, and Agnes walked in. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying, but there was a determination in her expression that gave Jason a glimmer of hope. "Jason, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady, despite the emotions swirling beneath the surface. Jason stood up, his heart racing. "Agnes, I'm so glad you're here. I've missed you so much." Agnes held up a hand to stop him. "Jason, this isn't going to be easy, and I'm not sure where we go from here, but I need you to understand how much you've hurt me." "I do, Agnes. I know I've hurt you deeply, and I'm so sorry," Jason said, his voice breaking. "I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Agnes took a deep breath, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. "I don't know if things can ever be right again, Jason, but I'm willing to try, for the sake of what we had and what we might still have." Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him, though he knew this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. Thank you, Agnes. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. As they sat down to talk, the path to healing seemed daunting and uncertain. But for the first time since the confession, there was a glimmer of hope. It would be a long road, filled with painful conversations and the slow rebuilding of trust. But Jason was willing to do whatever it took to try and repair the damage he had done. And as Agnes spoke, her voice filled with both pain and determination, Jason knew that he would spend the rest of his life trying to earn her forgiveness. Chapter 5. The Revenge. Agnes spent the next week in a daze, trying to process the betrayal. She felt a mix of anger and sadness, a sense of loss that was almost too much to bear. The emotional pain was overwhelming, and she couldn't focus on anything else. She wandered through the house, each room filled with memories now tainted by Jason and June's actions. As she lay awake at night, the searing images of their betrayal played over and over in her mind. She didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear: she couldn't let this go unpunished. Agnes's rage began to transform into a cold, calculating determination. She decided that she had to take revenge on both Jason and June. They had both betrayed her, and they both deserved to pay for it. She began to formulate a plan, a way to make them suffer as she had suffered. Agnes's first target was June. She knew that June was still infatuated with Jason, and she decided to use that to her advantage. She began to act as if she had forgiven Jason, pretending that they were working on rebuilding their marriage. She was distant but civil to June, not letting on that she knew about the affair. She knew that June's impulsive and volatile nature would make her easy to manipulate if she played her cards right. One evening, she suggested that they all have dinner together. "It's time we put the past behind us," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to move forward." June, believing that Agnes had no idea about the affair, readily agreed. She saw it as an opportunity to continue her clandestine relationship with Jason under the guise of family harmony. During dinner, Agnes was the perfect hostess, her demeanor calm and composed. But beneath the surface, she was seething with anger. The dining room was set impeccably, the table adorned with Agnes's best china and a centerpiece of fresh flowers from the garden she had lovingly tended. Jason and June took their seats, unaware of the emotional storm brewing beneath Agnes's serene exterior. As they began to eat, Agnes subtly steered the conversation towards their shared past, bringing up memories of their childhood, moments that were painful for June. "Do you remember when you got expelled from school for that prank?" Agnes asked with a seemingly innocent smile. "Mum and Dad were so disappointed in you." June's face flushed, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. "Yes, I remember," she replied tightly, trying to maintain her composure. Agnes continued, undeterred. "And what about that time you ran away to New York, only to come back a week later because you had nowhere to go? Those were such reckless times for you." Jason glanced nervously between the two sisters, sensing the tension but unsure of its cause. He tried to change the subject, but Agnes was relentless, her words dripping with venom. Each comment was a carefully aimed barb, designed to wound and humiliate June. June's temper flared, but she tried to keep it in check. She knew that losing control would only make things worse. But Agnes's relentless barrage of reminders about her past failures, broken relationships, and reckless behavior pushed her closer to the edge. Finally, June couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you doing this, Agnes?" she snapped, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "Why are you bringing up all these things?" Agnes leaned in, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Because, June, You deserve to be reminded of the pain you've caused. You need to understand what it's like to be betrayed. June's face turned pale as the realization hit her. You know, don't you? Agnes smiled, a smile devoid of warmth, her eyes glittering with a hard, steely resolve. Oh, I know, June. I know everything. June's eyes widened in horror and guilt. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. The room seemed to close in around her, the weight of Agnes's revelation crushing her spirit. The silence that followed was heavy and oppressive, broken only by the sound of Jason's sharp intake of breath. Jason, who had been watching the exchange with growing unease, finally understood the full extent of Agnes's wrath. "Agnes, please," he began, his voice pleading. Agnes turned her gaze to him, her expression unchanged. "Please what, Jason? Please forgive you? Please pretend that nothing happened? You betrayed me with my own sister. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Jason's shoulders slumped, the enormity of his actions crashing down on him anew. "I never wanted to hurt you, Agnes. I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Agnes's voice was ice-cold. "A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. Sleeping with my sister repeatedly over the course of a year is a choice, a deliberate, selfish choice." The atmosphere in the room was tense, charged with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Agnes stood up, her movements deliberate and controlled. "I think this dinner is over. I need you both to leave. Now." June, feeling both humiliated and frightened, quickly gathered her things and left without another word. Jason hesitated, his eyes filled with regret and despair. But Agnes's unwavering gaze left no room for argument. He followed June out, the door closing behind them, with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone, Agnes stood in the middle of the dining room, her chest heaving with the effort of maintaining her composure. She had taken the first step in her plan for revenge, but she knew there was still much more to do. She wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. As she cleared the table, her mind raced with thoughts of the next phase of her plan. She would make them both pay, but she would do it on her terms, in her own time. The betrayal had cut deep, but Agnes was determined to emerge stronger. She would reclaim her life piece by piece, and in the process, she would ensure that Jason and June understood the true meaning of betrayal. Chapter 6. The Consequences. June fled the house that night, unable to face the wrath of her sister. The confrontation had shattered her, and she knew she couldn't stay any longer. The next morning, she packed her belongings hastily, her hands trembling with a mix of fear and shame. She left without saying goodbye, disappearing into the city, leaving behind a trail of chaos and heartbreak. Agnes's plan had worked, but it did little to ease the pain she felt. The betrayal still lingered, a wound that refused to heal. Jason, on the other hand, was a broken man. He had hoped that confessing would be the first step towards redemption, but it only seemed to deepen the rift between him and Agnes. He tried to make amends, to prove his love and commitment, but Agnes remained distant. His attempts to bridge the gap were met with cold indifference or outright hostility. The guilt weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder of his betrayal. Weeks turned into months, and the strain on their marriage grew. They went through the motions of their daily lives, but the connection they once shared was gone. Their interactions were strained, their conversations terse and filled with unspoken pain. Agnes couldn't bring herself to forgive Jason, and Jason couldn't forgive himself. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a prison, each room echoing with the memories of happier times. One day, as Agnes was tending to the garden, her sanctuary from the turmoil inside, Jason approached her. He watched her for a moment, her hands gently nurturing the plants she loved so much. His heart ached at the sight of her, so strong, yet so broken. "Agnes," he began softly, his voice tinged with desperation, "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to make things right. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your forgiveness." Agnes looked up at him, her eyes weary and filled with sorrow. "Jason, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. What you did, it broke something inside me. I don't know if it can be fixed." Her words cut him deeply, but he knew they were deserved. He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I understand, but I won't give up on us, Agnes. I'll keep trying, no matter how long it takes." Agnes turned away, her heart heavy with sorrow. She wanted to believe him, to find a way back to the love they once shared, but the pain was still too raw. She knew that the road to healing would be long and difficult, and she wasn't sure if she had the strength to walk it. But as she looked at the man she had once loved, she couldn't help but wonder if there was still a chance for them, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. The days turned into a blur of routine and forced normalcy. Agnes threw herself into her work, her garden, anything to distract from the emptiness inside. Jason continued to try and reach out, to show her that he was committed to making amends. He took on more household chores, cooked her favorite meals, and left little notes of apology and love around the house. But each gesture, while earnest, felt inadequate in the face of the enormity of his betrayal. They attended marriage counseling, hoping to find some way to navigate through the pain and anger. The sessions were intense, filled with raw emotion and difficult truths. Agnes struggled to open up, her hurt too deep to articulate fully. Jason faced his own demons, confronting the reasons behind his infidelity and the impact it had on his wife. Progress was slow, and there were times when it felt like they were going backward rather than forward. One evening, as they sat in their living room, the silence between them almost unbearable, Agnes spoke. "Do you really think we can get past this, Jason? That we can ever be happy again?" Agnes, meanwhile, grappled with her own emotions. She vacillated between moments of hope and despair, often feeling like she was walking a tightrope between forgiveness and resentment. Dr. Morgan encouraged her to express these conflicting feelings, reassuring her that it was a natural part of the healing process. One breakthrough came during a particularly intense therapy session. Agnes had been talking about the night she discovered the affair, her voice trembling with emotion. Jason listened intently, tears streaming down his face as he realized the depth of the pain he had caused. In that moment, Agnes saw his genuine remorse, and it sparked a flicker of empathy within her. "Jason," she said, her voice breaking, "I don't know if I can ever forget what happened, but I want to try and forgive. Not just for you, but for me. I don't want to carry this anger with me forever." Jason's heart swelled with hope. "Thank you, Agnes. That's all I can ask for. We'll take it one day at a time." As the weeks turned into months, small signs of progress began to emerge. They started spending more time together, engaging in activities they once enjoyed. They went for walks in the park, cooked meals together, and even started planning a small vacation. These moments, though tentative, were steps towards rebuilding their bond. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Agnes turned to Jason. "Do you remember when we used to do this every evening? Just sit and watch the sunset, talking about our day." Jason smiled, a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. "Of course I do. Those were some of my favorite moments. Agnes sighed, a sense of longing in her voice. I want to find that again, Jason. I want to rediscover the love we had. Jason took her hand, his touch gentle yet firm. We will, Agnes. We'll create new memories, new moments. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Agnes felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a promise of immediate healing, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Their journey was far from over, and the path ahead was still uncertain. But with each small step, each act of kindness and understanding, they moved closer to a future where forgiveness and love could coexist. Only time would tell if their efforts would be enough, but for now, they were willing to try, and that, in itself, was a testament to the strength of their bond and the resilience of their love. Chapter 8. The Healing Process. As the months passed, Agnes and Jason continued to work on their marriage. There were good days and bad days, moments of closeness and moments of distance, but gradually, they began to find a new rhythm, an emerging pattern of tentative steps forward and occasional setbacks. Jason's transformation was palpable. He was more attentive, more present, and more committed to their relationship than ever before. He took an active interest in Agnes's hobbies, spending time with her in the garden and joining her on her walks. The garden, once solely Agnes's sanctuary, became a shared space where they planted new flowers together, each bloom a symbol of their effort to nurture their bond. He also made an effort to be more transparent, sharing his thoughts and feelings openly. Gone were the days of guarded silences and evasive answers. Jason's honesty, even when uncomfortable, was a testament to his renewed dedication. Agnes, too, began to let her guard down. She allowed herself to feel moments of joy and connection, even though the pain still lingered. She found solace in her creative outlets, taking up painting as a way to express her emotions. Her paintings became a vivid journal of her journey, each canvas a blend of the sorrow and hope she experienced. The act of creating something beautiful from her pain was cathartic, offering her a sense of control and healing. One afternoon, as she was working on a new painting in her sunlit studio, Jason entered the room. He stood quietly behind her, watching as she carefully applied strokes of color to the canvas. The room was filled with the scent of fresh paint and the soft sound of classical music playing in the background. "That's beautiful, Agnes," he said softly, his voice a gentle interruption. "You have a real talent." Agnes turned to look at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thank you, Jason. It's been therapeutic for me." Jason nodded, his eyes filled with admiration and something deeper, a profound respect for her resilience. "I'm glad you found something that brings you peace." As they stood there, a quiet understanding passed between them. They were both trying, both healing in their own ways. It was a slow and often painful process, but it was a start. Jason looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "I don't know, Agnes, but I want to try. I want to fight for us, for what we had. I believe we can find a way, if we both want it badly enough." Agnes sighed, her heart aching with the weight of their shared pain. "I don't know if I have the strength, Jason. Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of what you did. It feels like a constant battle, just to keep going." Jason reached out, taking her hand in his. "Then let me be strong for both of us. Let me prove to you every day that I'm worthy of your forgiveness. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Tears welled up in Agnes's eyes, and for the first time in months, she let herself cry in front of Jason. The walls she had built around her heart began to crack, if only a little. "I want to believe you, Jason. I really do. But I'm so scared of getting hurt again." Jason pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as she sobbed. "I know, Agnes, and I'm scared too, but we have to try. For us." As they held each other, the weight of their shared sorrow slowly began to lift. It was a small step, a fragile beginning, but it was something. Only time would tell if they could truly heal and rebuild their life together. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but in that moment, there was a glimmer of hope. Agnes knew that forgiveness wouldn't come easily, and trust would take even longer to rebuild. But as she looked into Jason's eyes, she saw the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, a man who was flawed but willing to fight for their future. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Chapter 7. The Path to Redemption. In the months that followed, Agnes and Jason continued to navigate the rocky terrain of their relationship. Jason made a concerted effort to show his dedication. He attended therapy sessions, both individually and with Agnes, hoping to understand the root of his actions and to mend the broken trust between them. Each session was a step towards redemption, though the path was fraught with obstacles. Agnes, though skeptical, agreed to give therapy a try. She found herself opening up about her pain, her feelings of betrayal, and the impact it had on her sense of self-worth. The sessions were emotionally draining, but they also provided a glimmer of hope. Slowly, she began to see the value in confronting her emotions rather than burying them. Their therapist, Dr. Morgan, was a patient and empathetic woman in her early 40s. With her calm demeanor and insightful questions, she created a safe space for Agnes and Jason to explore their feelings. She encouraged them to communicate openly and honestly, to express their emotions without fear of judgment. Through these sessions, Agnes began to see a side of Jason she had never fully understood. She saw his vulnerability, his regret, and his genuine desire to make amends. Despite this, the scars of the past were not easily forgotten. Agnes found it difficult to let go of the anger and hurt. She often withdrew into herself, seeking solace in her gardening and long walks. Her garden became a sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the rhythms of nature and momentarily escape the turmoil within. Jason respected her need for space, but he also remained steadfast in his efforts to rebuild their bond. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Jason reached out and took Agnes's hand. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. He looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear, knowing that this moment was crucial. "Agnes, I know I've caused you immense pain," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'll do it." Agnes looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. She saw the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once been her rock, but she also saw the man who had betrayed her. It was a complex mix of emotions that she struggled to reconcile. The memories of his infidelity were still fresh, the wound still raw. "I appreciate that, Jason," she said softly, her voice tinged with a mix of sadness and determination. "But it's going to take time. I need to learn how to trust you again." Jason nodded, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. "I'll wait as long as it takes, Agnes. I love you." In the days that followed, Jason continued to prove his commitment. He participated actively in their therapy sessions, often delving deep into his own psyche to uncover the motivations behind his actions. He admitted to feeling neglected and unappreciated, but he also acknowledged that these feelings were no excuse for his betrayal. He understood that true healing required honesty and accountability. Their therapy sessions with Dr. Morgan continued to be a cornerstone of their healing. In one particularly revealing session, Dr. Morgan encouraged them to discuss their fears for the future. Agnes confessed her fear of being hurt again, of investing in a relationship that might crumble. Jason spoke about his fear of never being able to make amends, of living with the shadow of his betrayal forever. "I don't want to live in fear, Jason," Agnes said, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "But it's hard to forget what happened. Every time I look at you, I remember the pain." Jason reached out, taking her hand in his. "I know, Agnes, and I understand. All I can do is show you, every day, that I'm committed to us, to our future. I want to be worthy of your trust again." Dr. Morgan nodded, her expression one of calm encouragement. "It's important to acknowledge these fears, but also to recognize the progress you've made. Trust can be rebuilt, but it takes time and patience. You're both here, working together, and that speaks volumes about your dedication to each other." Outside of therapy, they found small ways to reconnect. They revisited old traditions, like their evening ritual of watching the sunset from the porch. Sitting together in the fading light, they would talk about their day, their hopes, and their memories. These moments, though simple, were significant steps in rebuilding their bond. One evening, as they sat on the porch with their hands intertwined, Agnes turned to Jason. "Do you remember our first sunset here? How we talked about our dreams for the future?" Jason smiled, a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. "I do. We were so full of hope, so sure of ourselves." Agnes sighed, a sense of longing in her voice. "I want to find that again, Jason. I want to rediscover the love we had." Jason squeezed her hand gently. "We will, Agnes. We'll create new memories, new moments. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Agnes felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a promise of immediate healing, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Their journey was far from over, and the path ahead was still uncertain. But with each small step, each act of kindness and understanding, they moved closer to a future where forgiveness and love could coexist. Only time would tell if their efforts would be enough, but for now, they were willing to try, and that, in itself, was a testament to the strength of their bond and the resilience of their love. Chapter 9. The Unexpected Turn. Just as things seemed to be settling into a fragile new normal, life threw another curveball. Agnes discovered she was pregnant. The news hit her like a tidal wave, overwhelming her with a mix of emotions: shock, anxiety, and an unexpected flicker of joy. She hadn't planned for this, especially not in the midst of their turmoil. The tiny plus sign on the pregnancy test felt like a harbinger of a future she hadn't dared to envision. When she told Jason, his reaction was one of cautious optimism. He took the news with a deep breath, his eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and hope. "Agnes, this could be a chance for us to start fresh, to build something new together." Agnes was uncertain. The thought of bringing a child into their fractured relationship was daunting. She feared that the added stress might exacerbate their already fragile bond. Yet, as she watched Jason's hopeful expression, she felt a flicker of hope herself, a glimmer that perhaps this unexpected turn could be a catalyst for deeper healing. "Maybe," she said, her voice trembling with uncertainty, "maybe this is what we need." As the weeks turned into months, Agnes and Jason found themselves growing closer in ways they hadn't anticipated. The pregnancy, though unplanned, became a unifying force. They attended prenatal classes together, their hands clasped tightly as they learned about the journey ahead. Each class was a step toward building something new, something fragile but hopeful. They prepared the nursery with meticulous care, choosing soft pastels and whimsical decorations. Agnes found solace in the routine of creating a space for their child, each brushstroke on the walls a meditation on renewal. Jason was equally invested, assembling furniture and discussing future plans with a level of enthusiasm that had been absent for so long. Their conversations, once stilted and fraught with tension, began to take on a different tone. They talked about their hopes and fears for the future, sharing dreams of what their family could become. The impending arrival of their child gave them a renewed sense of purpose, a tangible reason to keep fighting for their marriage. One evening, as they sat together in the nursery, Jason reached out and placed a hand on Agnes's growing belly. The baby's movements were a reminder of the new life they were bringing into the world. "I can't wait to meet our little one," he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Agnes looked at him, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Me too, Jason. It's scary, but it's also exciting." Jason nodded, his eyes reflecting the same mix of emotions. "We'll get through this, Agnes. We'll do it together." As the pregnancy progressed, Agnes found herself leaning on Jason more and more. He was attentive to her needs, ensuring she was comfortable and supported. He read books on parenting, eager to be as prepared as possible for the challenges ahead. His commitment to their future and to their child was unwavering, and it gave Agnes a sense of security she hadn't felt in a long time. One day, during a routine checkup, the doctor informed them they were expecting a boy. The news brought a fresh wave of excitement and anticipation. They began to brainstorm names, each suggestion a step closer to solidifying their new reality. "How about Benjamin?" Jason suggested one evening as they lay in bed. Agnes smiled, the name resonating with her. "Benjamin. I like it. It feels right." The months continued to pass, and as Agnes's due date approached, the tension that had once defined their relationship began to ease. The shared experience of preparing for their child created a bond that was stronger than the pain of the past. They still had their moments of doubt and fear, but they faced them together, hand in hand. The day Agnes went into labor was a whirlwind of emotions. Jason stayed by her side, his presence a source of comfort and strength. The hours were long and exhausting, but when they finally heard the first cries of their son, all the pain and uncertainty seemed to melt away. Jason held Benjamin in his arms, tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect, Agnes. Absolutely perfect." Agnes, exhausted but filled with an overwhelming sense of love, nodded. "Yes, he is." In that moment, as they gazed at their newborn son, they felt a sense of unity they hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if Benjamin's arrival had brought with it a chance for true healing, a chance to rebuild their lives on a foundation of love and forgiveness. Their journey was far from over, and they knew there would be challenges ahead. But with each passing day, they grew stronger together, finding joy in the small moments and hope in the promise of the future. The path to redemption was long and winding, but they were committed to walking it together, step by step, hand in hand. Chapter 10. The New Beginning. When their baby girl, Emma, was born, it was a moment of profound joy and transformation. The delivery room was filled with a warm, soft light, and the sounds of the hospital seemed to fade into the background as Agnes cradled her newborn daughter in her arms. Emma's tiny fingers curled around Agnes's thumb, and in that instant, Agnes felt a surge of love and protectiveness so strong it brought tears to her eyes. Jason stood beside her, gazing at their daughter with tears in his eyes as well. The moment felt surreal, a perfect encapsulation of the hope and renewal that had slowly been rebuilding their lives. Despite everything they had been through, despite the betrayal and the pain, they had created something beautiful together. Emma's arrival felt like a testament to their resilience, a symbol of their ability to create new life and new beginnings out of the ashes of their past. The arrival of Emma brought a new dynamic to their relationship. They were no longer just husband and wife. They were parents, united in their love for their child. This shared responsibility and joy gave them a renewed sense of purpose and a common goal. The challenges of the past didn't disappear, but they became secondary to the needs of their daughter. In the months that followed, Agnes and Jason continued to work on their marriage, but now they had a new source of motivation. They wanted to create a stable and loving environment for Emma, to show her what it meant to be a family. This desire to provide the best for their daughter became a guiding force in their lives. Agnes still had moments of doubt and pain. There were nights when she would lie awake, the old fears and insecurities creeping back into her mind. But she also found moments of happiness and contentment, particularly when she watched Jason with Emma. He was a devoted father, always attentive and gentle. He would sing to her softly, change her diapers with care, and spend hours just holding her, marveling at the miracle they had created. She saw the changes in Jason, his dedication to being a good father and husband, and she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. His efforts were genuine and heartfelt, and each day he proved his commitment not just with words, but with actions. One evening, as they stood together in Emma's nursery, watching her sleep peacefully in her crib, Agnes took Jason's hand. The room was dimly lit, the gentle hum of a lullaby playing in the background. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the nightlight. "I think we can do this, Jason," she said quietly, her voice filled with a cautious optimism. "I think we can make this work." Jason looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. He squeezed her hand gently, a reassuring gesture that spoke volumes. "I believe in us, Agnes. We've come so far, and we can keep going. We'll build the future we want for Emma, and for us." Agnes smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. They had been through the storm, and while the scars remained, they had found a way to heal and grow stronger together. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face it, hand in hand. The presence of Emma in their lives had given them a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper bond. They began a new chapter, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future. Every day brought new challenges and new joys, but they faced them together, their hearts united in their love for each other and for their daughter. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they also knew they had the strength and the love to navigate it. As they stood there, watching Emma sleep, they felt a profound sense of gratitude for the second chance they had been given. They had rebuilt their lives from the ground up, and while the foundation had cracks, it was also fortified with the lessons they had learned and the love they had rediscovered. Agnes leaned her head on Jason's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They stood there in silence, basking in the peacefulness of the moment, the soft breaths of their sleeping daughter, a soothing reminder of all they had overcome and all they had to look forward to. And so, they began their new beginning, not just as husband and wife, but as a family that had weathered the storms of betrayal and heartache and had emerged stronger and more resilient. A family that was ready to face the future with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.